My name is Mila Rowan. I'm 29 years old. And the night my father smashed my laptop, he gave me the best revenge weapon I could ever ask for. The metal frame cracked against the floor, screen shattering into a spiderweb of glass. My breath froze as the pieces skittered across the glossy wood, glittering under the dining room chandelier. Dad towered over me, chest heaving, voice a low growl that felt heavy enough to crush my ribs. "You have 10 minutes to get out of this house. You're not family anymore." Those words didn't hit me like a scream. They hit like a funeral bell. Slow, echoing, final. Mom stared at her untouched slice of birthday cake like she could disappear into the frosting. Chase leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking like he'd been waiting years to see this. And Brielle, my sweet little sister, actually clapped her hands together. "Finally," she said, sipping her soda. "Bye, Mila." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick white envelope. Heavy, sealed, marked with a gold legal insignia. I set it right on the table. The thud was louder than my heartbeat. 10 minutes? I said quietly. "Fine. In 10 minutes, you'll understand this house was never yours to begin with." Chase's smirk faltered. Brielle raised her phone to record me, hoping for a dramatic meltdown she could post online. Guests shifted nervously, unsure if they were witnessing a family dispute or a crime scene. I didn't care anymore because they had no idea what was coming. My eyes flicked to the camera deliberately. "Stick around," I said. "It gets worse." But long before this moment, long before the threats and humiliation, there was a time when I believed in this family. Lafayette, Louisiana, brief flashes of what I used to think were happy memories. Crawfish boils and backyard sprinklers. Birthday balloons taped to the living room wall. Dad calling Mom Queen, Mom posting photos of perfect smiles on Facebook. But those memories only ever belonged to Chase and Brielle. Chase, the golden boy. First place trophies gifted for just showing up. When he brought home a C, they threw him a movie night to boost his confidence. When I brought home an A, they barely looked up from their phones. Brielle, the princess. Cosmetology classes and expensive clothes they couldn't afford. If she wanted something, they got it. If I asked for a calculator for honors math, I was begging for luxuries. Love in our house wasn't shared. It was rationed. And somehow, I was always the one starved. Only one person ever saw me. My grandfather. Elliot Rowan. A retired architect with hands rough from decades of drafting and building, who smelled of sawdust and peppermint. He gave me what I never received from my parents. Attention, encouragement, the belief that I mattered. Every weekend, I'd bike to his house by the marsh, and we'd sit for hours at his old drafting table. He taught me that buildings only stood strong when their foundations were honest. "People are the same, Mila," he'd say. "Some stand, others collapse under their own lies." I didn't know it then, but he was preparing me for the very people who raised me. Then came the night everything changed. I had just graduated high school, dreaming of college and a future where I could finally escape. Grandpa collapsed outside his mailbox, heart attack. I held his hand in the hospital for hours while machines beeped warnings into the air. Chase wasn't there. Brielle was at a pool party. Mom said hospitals made her anxious. Dad said he had work in the morning. Grandpa squeezed my hand one last time. "Don't let them take what you earn. Mila, you deserve more than scraps." 3 weeks later, he was gone. At the funeral, while my parents smiled politely at neighbors and accepted condolences like they were receiving compliments, a lawyer approached me, a tall man in a charcoal suit. "Miss Rowan," he said, "your grandfather left something that must be discussed privately." Dad's head snapped up. "We handle family matters together," he said, reaching for the file. The lawyer stepped back. "This is for Mila only," he said, firm. Their shock was so thick I could have bottled it. Chase's face twisted with confusion. Mom's eyes narrowed with suspicion. But they let me walk away. That was the moment the first spark of justice ignited inside me. Since that day, I worked harder than any of them ever bothered to. 2 jobs, full scholarship. Late nights studying until my vision blurred. I earned a cybersecurity degree, landed a remote job in Houston, and paid off my college debt before I was even 26. Chase dropped out. Brielle partied through every class she failed. Mom and Dad took more loans to keep up their perfect image. Suddenly, my success wasn't a harmless hobby. It was a threat. Dad accused me of showing off. Mom said I acted better than the family. Chase demanded money for his latest business idea. Brielle complained that I never supported her dreams. Every no I gave was another strike on the scoreboard against me. So why was I still living there? Because Grandpa's final gift wasn't something I could explain with a casual sentence. And it wasn't money they could use. It was power. It was leverage. It was the kind of inheritance that transforms a girl into the very weapon they forged against their own hearts. And that night, my mother's 50th birthday, Dad smashed the last piece of my work equipment. My laptop, the tool I used to make a living. He wanted me jobless, powerless, desperate. 10 minutes to leave? Good. Because in 10 minutes, my family was going to find out the truth. I wasn't the one getting kicked out of the house. They were. I stood up from my chair. Soup dripped from my hair onto the floor. Every phone in the room aimed right at me. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I simply tapped the envelope once. Before I go, I said, let's see who this house truly belongs to. And then I smiled, because I already knew the answer. Everyone stared at that envelope like it might explode. Dad's face was already turning the same shade as the wine in his glass. He thought I would beg, cry, pack my things and vanish like trash on the curb. But I just stood there, wiping the soup from my cheek, letting the silence stretch tight as piano wire. What is that supposed to be? Dad barked. I slid the envelope toward him. Go on. Open it. He hesitated, and that alone gave me a rush of satisfaction. Dad wasn't used to hesitation. He was used to control, of the house, Mom, Chase, Brielle, and me. He ripped the seal aggressively, like the paper had personally offended him, and unfolded the packet of documents inside. His hand stopped midway through the first page. His eyes widened. What is this? He whispered, like I'd just handed him a death sentence. Mom leaned over his shoulder, her perfectly manicured hand squeezing his arm. Her breath caught. This isn't possible. Chase yanked the papers out of Dad's grip and scanned them, his lips moving as he sounded out the legal words he'd never cared to learn. This house. Grandpa left the house to you? He looked up at me like I'd committed a crime. No, that's ridiculous, I shrugged. It's written clearly enough. The house, the land, the 2 rental properties on Bro Road, all to me. Brielle's jaw dropped. That's like $500,000. Actually, I corrected softly, closer to 800,000, considering the market growth. The guests who were still sitting pretended not to listen, eyes down, ears wide open. Someone's fork slipped from their hand and clanged against the plate. You manipulated him, Dad snapped. You took advantage of an old man. I stepped closer, eyes locked on his. I held his hand while he was dying. You weren't there. You only showed up for the will reading, hoping for a payday. His fist tightened around the papers until they crumpled. Chase shoved his chair back. Give it up, Mila. Even if this was real, Mom and Dad own the house. Grandpa sold it to them years ago. No, I said, shaking my head. Grandpa bought it back quietly 2 years before he passed. And he put Dad and Mom as renters on a temporary agreement. They were supposed to pay monthly. I tilted my head. But they didn't. Not once. Mom gasped. You think we're your tenants? I didn't have to think it. It was written in ink. Not tenants, I murmured. Defaulted tenants. Dad surged to his feet, knocking his chair over. You brat! You think you can throw us into the street? I looked around at the decorations, the fancy tablecloth, the expensive cake, all the things they bought to convince people they were successful. Dad, I said softly, You already threw me into the street. I just have the paperwork to open the door for you two. Mom's face twisted, all elegance stripped away. We raised you. We fed you. We gave you a place to live. A place that wasn't yours to give, I snapped. Grandpa paid for everything. You used his money until the day he died, then spent all your own trying to replace the lifestyle he gave you. Chase slammed his hand on the table. You can't do this! I pointed at the documents. According to the eviction process, I absolutely can. Brielle stood too, eyes blazing, mascara already smudging. You're jealous! You've always been jealous of us. That made me laugh. Truly laugh. The absurdity shook out of me like relief. Jealous? Of what? I asked. The debt collectors calling every week? The failed businesses, the lies? The credit cards maxed out to pretend this family is perfect? I gestured to the cake. You spent $500 on frosting while ignoring the mortgage notices Grandpa tried to help you pay before he died. Mom flinched, and for the first time all night, I saw something real in her eyes. Fear. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh my God." Dad's voice was low and dangerous. We can contest this. You think some paper will stop me? You can contest, I agreed. But the lawyer who drafted those papers is the same one who helped you refinance your truck and your boat. He knows exactly what you owe. I tapped the envelope again. And he's on my side. Dad's nostrils flared, the vein on his temple twitching. Get out. I will, I said, after I finish packing. But before I go... I pulled my phone from my purse and pressed a button, recording the video myself. I want your official response on camera. Mom lunged forward. Turn that off. No, I said without flinching. You want to humiliate me? Fine, the world can watch both sides. Dad knocked the phone from my hand. It skidded across the floor. I stared at him slowly, the air between us turning electric, and then I smiled. Thank you, I whispered. I needed that on video. Chase's eyes widened as he realized what I meant. She's setting us up, he muttered. No, I wasn't setting anything up. They were. Dad grabbed my arm, hard, too hard. A collective gasp rippled through the room as he yanked me closer, his breath hot with rage. You listen to me, he growled. This is my house. Always has been. Always will be. I leaned in close enough for only him to hear. No, Dad. You lost this house the moment you lost your father's respect. His grip loosened, just enough, and I stepped back. If you're going to call the cops on me, I said calmly, make sure you tell them you're attacking the legal owner of the property. He froze. Mom's lips parted. No words came. Chase collapsed back into his chair, defeated before the battle even began. Brielle? She started crying, not from sadness, but from the realization that the princess was about to lose her castle. I picked up my phone and gave the guests a polite smile. Thanks for celebrating with my family tonight. I'll make sure you get an update. Soon. Then I walked toward my room, head high, soup still soaking into my hair, but not a tear on my face. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the powerless one. I was the storm coming to collect. I packed slowly, intentionally, not because I needed time, but because I wanted them to sit with the fear that had just punched a hole in their perfect fantasy. Every zipper, every folded shirt into the suitcase was another minute ticking against Dad's stupid 10-minute deadline. From the dining room, I heard hushed voices rising into frantic arguments. You should have checked the paperwork. Chase hissed. How? It was supposed to be ours. Mom cried. It is ours. Dad snarled. That old man didn't know what he was signing. It was like listening to animals trapped in a cage they built for themselves. I took my time brushing the cold soup from my hair, letting it drip onto the bathroom floor. I stared in the mirror at my own eyes, steady, focused, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. The bullied girl who came home late from school to avoid arguments, she was gone. By the time I wheeled my suitcase toward the stairs, the house was buzzing like a kicked beehive. Dad saw me first. His posture straightened, shoulders stiff with manufactured authority. "You're leaving," he said. "Right now," I nodded. "I will. After I make one phone call." Dad chuckled like he thought he'd regained control. "Go ahead. Call whoever you want. The cops will laugh in your face when you tell them you're evicting your own parents." I raised my phone and dialed. Not the police, my lawyer. He answered on the second ring. "Mila, are you safe?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Everything happened like we expected." I turned toward my parents. "They just threatened to throw me out. Property destroyed. Physical assault." Dad froze. The lawyer's voice grew louder, firm. "Put me on speaker." I did. "Mr. and Mrs. Rowan," he said, tone cutting through the room like a scalpel. "This call is being recorded. You are currently occupying Mila Rowan's home without a valid rental agreement. Any further intimidation or attempt to remove her from the residence will be interpreted as harassment. And grounds for immediate legal action," Chase swore under his breath. Mom clutched her necklace like it could save her soul. "We didn't know. We thought—" "I will be filing the eviction papers first thing Monday morning," my lawyer continued. "You will have 30 days to vacate. If you interfere with Mila in any way during that period, the eviction will be accelerated under Louisiana Revised Statute 93259. Dad looked like he might pass out. "And one more thing," the lawyer added. "The rental properties you ignored? The tenants have been paying Mila directly for the last 2 years. She has a documented income stream. I suggest you accept that she is not financially dependent on you in any way." Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. "Rental income? She's been hiding money?" I smiled. "Not hiding. Just not sharing." Dad exploded. "You planned this. You planned this whole—" "I planned on surviving," I interrupted. "That's all." Dad slammed his fist into the wall, drywall cracking under his knuckles. Mom screamed. Chase stepped away from him like the explosion might spread. Brielle sobbed into her hands, mascara dripping black stains onto her white dress. I ended the call. "Thank you. I'll update you if anything changes." The lawyer said one last thing before hanging up. "Mila, I'm proud of you." That one sentence almost broke me. Almost. Dad stared at the cracked wall, breathing like he couldn't fill his lungs. When he turned toward me again, his voice was a low, poisonous whisper. "If you think you've won, you're dumber than I thought." "No," I said gently. "Winning would mean I care about beating you. I don't. I just want what's mine." Chase stepped forward, trying to reclaim his big brother dominance. "You think you're the victim? You've always been ungrateful. We fed you." You fed me." The laugh that came out of me sounded almost unfamiliar. "I fed myself since I was 15. Every paycheck from every job, Burger King, the library, night shifts at the gas station. Do you even remember?" No answer. "Of course not. You never cared who paid for my food," I said, eyes locked on Chase. "Just who paid for yours." Chase's jaw clenched. "You think you're so much better than us now?" I shook my head. "Not better. Just not brainwashed anymore." Brielle lifted her red, swollen eyes. "So you're just going to ruin our lives?" "You ruined your own when you decided I wasn't part of them," I said. "Grandpa knew. That's why he left everything to me," Mom suddenly snapped. "He only loved you because you manipulated him. You always stole attention. I raised a hand and shockingly, she stopped. "No, he loved me because I loved him back. Without wanting anything in return. That's something you never understood." Those words hit her harder than any shove or scream ever could. I turned toward the door. Dad barked, "Where do you think you're going?" "I told you, I'll leave on my own terms." I paused. "I'm going to stay with a friend tonight. I'll return in the morning to collect the rest of my things. If you touch my belongings, I let the threat hang in the air. We'll see how fast the sheriff arrives. I grabbed my suitcase handle and wheeled it across the floor. Then a hand caught my arm. Light. Trembling. Mom. Her voice was barely a breath. Mila, don't do this. Please. Don't tear this family apart. I looked down at her fingers, gripping me like I was her lifeline. This family was broken long before I discovered the truth. I whispered. You just never expected the broken one to put the pieces in her own hands. Her grip loosened, slow, reluctant, and I stepped away. Chase bit back tears he refused to let fall. Brielle turned her face away, shoulders shaking. Dad just stood there, silent, defeated, but in his eyes, pure hatred. I walked to the door, opened it, and breathed in the cool night air like I was finally tasting freedom. Before leaving, I looked back one more time and spoke the sentence that sealed everything. I'm not coming home anymore. You're leaving mine. Then I closed the door behind me. The sound was final, like a lock clicking shut. The night air felt like a cleanse. For the first time in years, I walked away from that house without feeling like a trespasser. My coworker and close friend Ava lived 10 minutes away. She didn't ask questions when she saw the soup in my hair. She just gave me a warm towel and said, "When you're ready." I was ready. We stayed awake until 3 a.m. drafting a plan. Document everything. Secure all proofs and let the law do the talking. Ava recorded my scalp where Dad yanked me, took photos of the smashed laptop, even the cracked wall from his punch. The next morning, after Ava placed a fresh cup of coffee in my hand, she asked, "Are you sure you want to face them again so soon?" "I have to," I told her. "This time I'm not the scared one." I drove back, spine straight, heart steady. When I pulled up to the house, a police car was already parked in the driveway. Of course they called the cops on me. The officers stood near the porch, while Mom cried on the steps, making sure the neighbors saw every tear. Dad pointed and waved his arms like a deranged traffic conductor. Chase lurked behind them, glaring. Brielle stayed inside, curtains twitching. One officer approached me. "Are you Mila Rowan?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "We received a report that you threatened violence and attempted to illegally force entry into this home." I almost laughed. "Actually," I said, holding up my phone, "I have the deed. The rental default documentation, the last 2 years of payment receipts from the tenants, and a recorded video of the assault and property destruction that occurred last night." Dad's face drained of color. The officer blinked. "You own the home?" "Yes. And for now, they are unauthorized occupants with an eviction notice pending." The second officer spoke up. "We've advised Mr. Rowan that if he puts his hands on you again, he will be taken into custody." Mom gasped. "You're taking her side?" "No," the officer replied. "We're taking the law's side." Dad threw his hands up. "She's our daughter." "This is our house." "She is your daughter," the officer agreed. "But this isn't your house anymore." Dad took a step forward, then stopped when the officer rested a hand near his holster. He slinked back like a rabid dog, finally recognizing the fence around him. Chase stormed down the steps. "This is insane. You can't just ruin us." "You ruined yourselves," I said simply. "Grandpa tried to save you, but you spat in his face with every overdue bill and every lie." Mom cried harder, mascara carving black rivers down her cheeks. "We can fix this. We can talk about this as a family." "No," I said. "Families care about each other. This was a battlefield years before tonight." I walked past them and into the house. Dad didn't dare stop me this time. In my room, I packed the last of my things, photo albums Grandpa gave me, childhood books no one remembered buying, the old drafting pencil he placed in my hand the day he told me I'd build something better than the world I came from. As I rolled my suitcase out, Brielle finally emerged, face red, eyes swollen. "Please don't do this," she whispered. "Where will we go?" "You're adults," I said. Figure it out like I had to. That's different. She cried. You're smart. You had Grandpa loving you. I stopped at the door and looked back one final time. He loved all of you, I said quietly. You were just too busy loving yourselves to notice. Her shoulders fell, deflated under a truth she'd never considered. I stepped outside. The sun warmed my skin. The world didn't collapse without them. It opened. The officers escorted me to my car, making sure Dad kept his distance. Before I got in, he called out, "You'll regret this, Mila." "You'll come crawling back." I turned and smiled. I hope you remember saying that, when you're the one crawling. I closed the door and drove away without looking back. Time moved quickly after that. The eviction was formalized. 30 days later, the sheriff knocked on the same door they once slammed in my face. Neighbors watched as furniture was dragged onto the lawn. Mom sobbed, clutching picture frames like broken relics. Dad screamed legal threats that held no weight. Chase punched a mailbox in frustration. Brielle sat curled on the curb, mascara running again. And me? I stood across the street with Ava, coffee in hand, not hiding or apologizing, just witnessing the consequences they wrote for themselves. When the sheriff asked if I wanted them trespassed permanently, I said yes. The locks were changed by sunset. That night, a moving van came and left. Their new rental was far outside the wealthy neighborhood they once worshipped. No more fancy parties, no more pretending. The next morning, I unlocked the front door to my home. Silence greeted me, not hostile, not heavy. Peaceful. I walked through the rooms. Future painting projects mapped in my mind, the office where my new laptop would go, the spare bedrooms I'd rent out or turn into something better. I stopped at the dining room table and set down the envelope, the same one that started it all. Then I brought out a small wooden box Grandpa had given me years ago, one I never opened until after his will was read. Inside was a handwritten letter. Mila, strength is quiet until someone tries to crush it. Don't let them. Build the life they told you wasn't yours. Love, Grandpa. I pressed the letter to my chest and breathed in memories of sawdust and peppermint. I wasn't alone. Never was. The girl they underestimated had grown into the woman holding the keys. The one they called a disgrace was the only one Grandpa trusted to protect his legacy. The daughter they tried to erase became the one who erased their right to her. Silence. They made me an outsider. Grandpa made me the owner. Justice wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm. It was legal. It was mine. And the final revenge? Living beautifully in the home they lost. I smiled, walked into the kitchen, and threw the smashed laptop in the trash. You gave me 10 minutes to leave, I whispered into the empty room. But I'll give you a lifetime to remember what that cost you. Then I turned toward my future and closed the door on my past forever.